Here we go. Okay.
And presenting sponsors, electric companies, supporting sponsors, Webster Bank, but there's a whole bunch of other sponsors that are,
Oh, that's cool.
and they're already up to $44,000 so far.
Nice. Yeah, this is the first I've heard about it.
160 some odd charities, I think, that you can donate to.
Morning.
Missed you yesterday.
For about that.
Some good vacation? Bank of America.
I think we're good, David.
Good morning. This is a meeting of the El Paso City Employees Pension Fund Board of Trustees for Wednesday, November 15th, 2017. The time is 8:34 and we do have a quorum. Please stand for the moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Notice to the public. All matters listed under the consent agenda will be considered by the Pension Board to be routine and will be enacted by one motion in the form listed below. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the Pension Board or persons in the audience request specific items be removed from the consent agenda to the regular agenda for the discussion prior to the time the Pension Board votes on the motion to adopt the consent agenda.
Okay, so do you have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
So moved.
Motion made by Ed, seconded by Renee. We'll take a poll vote. Rebecca?
Aye.
Jesse?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
Robert?
Aye.
Renee? Motion passes.
Regular agenda, item 7, discussion and action regarding committee assignments.
So to follow along from last month, we're going to reassign the committee chair for the Administrative Services Committee from myself to Rebecca Torres. So she'll be the chair going forward. And our trustee, Jesse Garcia, will be added to the Audit Committee. Okay?
Item 8, discussion and action regarding the Treasurer's Report for the month ended October 31st, 2017.
I'd like to make a motion to take item number 13 first and move it to the forefront.
We're gonna pull them right after IT. IT might take some time, or we can move before IT. We can take the Treasury's report and then we'll follow it with our portfolio advisors. So, Louis? Had you read the item, David? I missed it.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Good morning.
Morning.
Louis Meyer, Treasury Services Coordinator, on behalf of Pat Degman, Comptroller. Treasury's report for October 2017. Beginning on the statement of net assets available for benefits for the month, cash and investments increased by 4.6 million. Unrestricted receivables are up by 3.8 million. Amounts due for securities purchased up 2.4 million. Overall liabilities down 2.5 million. And net assets available for benefits up 10.9 million. Continuing on the next page, statement of changes in net assets available for benefits. For the month of October, contributions were 3.3 million. Interest and dividends, 812,000. The net change in fair value of investments increased by $7.7 million. Benefits paid to retirees were $4.8 million, with an overall increase of $10.9 million. On the quarterly statement of changes in net assets available for benefits for the 2 months ended October 31st, contributions averaged $3.5 million per month. The net appreciation in fair value increased $16.4 million. Of this, $1.5 million came from venture capital income, $6.4 million came from net realized gains, $8.5 million came from net unrealized gains. On the investment income analysis, lower middle portion, net investment income year to date, 2.28%. Annualized, it would be 13.7%. And the fund is 30% of the way to its fiscal year 2018 net investment income target of $58.5 million.
So, Louis, on the benefits paid to retirees for this quarter, oh, that's only representing 2 months, that 4.7 million?
That's,
Seems like we're behind the, what's the difference, what's the explanation for that compared to the previous quarter?
I'll find out and report back to you. I'll find out and report back to you.
Well, yeah, fourth quarter FY17 was 16.6 million. So we're in the teens, and so far, unless this only represents.
We should be approximately 4.8 million per month, so we may have 1 month unrecorded.
Okay. Okay, any other questions or comments? So again, I think our ending fund balance available for benefits at 791 million is still a new high water mark. Is that correct, Robert?
Yes, sir, it is. Market's down today, so be careful what you say.
All right. Okay, thank you, Louis.
Thank you.
All right, so David, we'll go ahead and move up item number 13
Okay.
to follow item 8.
Item 13, discussion and action regarding the receipt of investment manager report from Portfolio Advisors as presented by Brian Murphy.
I just hit the down button. There we go. Thank you for your flexibility in letting me move up earlier on the agenda. I checked into the emergency room last night at 2 in the morning, found that I have a 5mm kidney stone, so I was on a morphine drip all night, and I can tell you it's already wearing off, so if I start to sweat during my presentation, that's why. Just wanted to give you a quick update on Portfolio Advisors so that you have comfort in the strength of the organization that is managing your capital, and then talk a little bit about your investments. So Portfolio Advisors was founded over 20 years ago in 1994. We currently have $21 billion of assets under management. We have 95 professionals. Most of them are in Connecticut at our headquarters, but we do have 6 people in Zurich and 6 people in Hong Kong that are investment teams. We have a very senior team because we do both separate account advisory work as well as managing funds. About 30% of our employees are managing directors, and an additional 10% are senior vice presidents. We're the owners of the firm because we're an independent firm, and we think that that broad ownership has allowed us to attract and retain really high-quality people. It also allows us to put very senior resources across all of our products and our client advisory services. I'm going to skip through a bunch of slides because we added a lot more detail for the investment committee yesterday that's not necessary for this meeting. Our three lines of business are that we provide funds management, separate account advisory, and then portfolio administration. The retirement system has participated in two of our different products, our portfolio advisors private equity funds, as well as our portfolio advisors secondary funds. And those are the first column and the fourth column in those pages. I think one of the important things that we focus on as a firm is risk. This asset class is a little bit more difficult to manage risk than some others. Because of the illiquid nature of it, it's difficult to move in and out of the assets. And so much of the risk mitigation is done up front as we're figuring out portfolio construction. We're looking for the quality of the managers that have the reputation and skill necessary to hit our target returns within the risk parameters that we have. We know that one of the mechanisms that is most usable by us as a manager is diversification. Too broad of diversification tends to average down the quality of the portfolio. Too little diversification, we believe, adds too much volatility to the portfolio. There is a significant difference between the highest performing managers in this asset class and just the average. Many times it's 20 percentage points. And so we want to make sure that we diversify significantly enough that we cut down on that volatility, but we still focus opportunistically on the very best managers. And we'll diversify across managers and strategies, geographies, industry, vintage year. You're participating in our fund of funds, and you participate in the buyout sector, the venture sector, the special situation sector. We invest money each year along the way. Vintage year diversification is really valuation diversification. Just like you wouldn't put all of your public equities in the market on a single day, you want to make sure that you're getting dollar cost averaging over a long period of time. So we focus on high quality managers. We do our upfront due diligence. Once we commit, we're pretty much locked in, and therefore we want to do both quantitative and qualitative analysis, understanding the strategy, the people, the track record, attribution, who really generated that return, and then we overlay our view of the market and whether we think that, you know, that return might be replicable. We also believe in diversifying across primaries, secondaries. Secondaries, as you'll recall, are just basically used partnerships where we're providing the liquidity for someone that needs to sell an illiquid partnership. And we found that to be an excellent business because generally we're able to negotiate attractive terms and buy these assets for below fair market value, and therefore we're capturing gain immediately at the close. And that gain shows up in a much stronger early IRR, and we'll talk about that in a couple slides. So this is an overview slide. Now we show the 4 different commitments that you've made to our different funds. You can see you committed to our private equity fund of funds in 2011, Fund 7, committed to a secondary fund of ours that was a vintage year of 2012. Did I say 2007? I'm reading 2011. So there was a vintage year 2011, 12, 13, and 16 are the different funds that you committed to. On the second column to the right, we show when you close. So you closed 2 of them in October 2012, 1 in October 2015, and then you made 2 separate commitments to our Passive 3 vehicle in June of 16 and March of 17. In total, our relationship is $115 million of commitments. We've drawn from you a little over half of that, 51.1%. We've distributed back 37.9% of that capital already. The total relationship return is 15.2% gross, so that's compounded over that time period, and 1.36 times.
So Brian, before you move on from that, a couple points or questions. The percentage of capital drawn at an average of 51%, or if you look at our oldest, on the PAP of 7, we're 65.6. Is that on pace? Is that, we're looking at 5 years in now, is 65% expected?
Yeah. Thank you for asking that question. If you notice the column to the left of that, it says the percentage of commitment drawn from the funds. So what we do is if we receive $100 million of subscriptions from limited partners, we'll try to commit $110 to $130 million to underlying funds. The reason is that we know that money will be distributed back before all of the commitments are there, and so there's an ability to recycle a little bit. We know that not all of the fund managers will draw down 100% of their capital. And so we want to make sure that if you commit money to us, that we ultimately will invest all that you committed to us and more. Because you pay us on these fund of funds on committed capital, by us committing more than the committed capital, we're actually managing that money for free. And so that helps to tighten the gross net spread. It allows us to deliver a better quality return, and it does accelerate the pace at which you're drawn. So what you can see is that the underlying managers for, say, PAPIF 7 have drawn 79% capital from the fund. We've only turned around and drawn 65% back from you because we've used some of the early liquidity to fund some of those things. It will ultimately catch up, and it catches up in one of two ways. We stop recycling and we get into that overcommitment piece, or we just release part of your commitment because we just didn't need it since we were just using cash flows to fund the capital calls coming out of the portfolio.
And so do we have a target date where we expect to be 100% funded? I guess is another.
So at the end of the investment period for a fund, which is typically about 6 years in, we want to be between 80 and 90% invested. The only thing that's reserved after that at the underlying fund manager is really management fees and follow-on investments, right? So if a buyout fund has a strategy where they will do, say, roll-up, since they buy a company, they want to make 3 or 4 acquisitions, they're allowed to do that outside of their investment period many times because they already have the core holding and they're able to do these follow-on investments. And so you'll see that it's not uncommon for a buyout fund to go back into the market to raise their next fund when they're 75% drawn. So there's 25% that's reserved for fees and for additional follow-on investments in the existing portfolio. So when you add all of those together, we expect that at the end of our investment period, we'll be kind of in that 75 to 85% range. We don't reserve for our fees. That's why we did the overcommitment, and we use the liquidity to make sure that we're paid out of the gains of the portfolio versus out of your capital. And so you'll be sitting at kind of 80 to 90% as you get into years 9 and 10, and that's when we start to really look at it and say, okay, we've fully deployed your, say $100 million. We don't need these reserves anymore. Let's release those so that you don't have to worry about ever having a capital call against them. I will mention that in the book it says NM for PASIF 3. PASIF 3's done very, very well. Secondary funds are a little bit of an anomaly because you purchase assets for below fair market value. You're capturing that gain at close. You have a relatively short holding period, and when you annualize that, it creates a fairly big number. So we don't like to go off the headline, and so we usually for several years put the fund in as NM because it's distorted. For example, as of March, the IRR was 105%, and the multiple was 1.64 times. So that those cash flows factor into your 15.2% return, but they're small dollars with short holding periods. So when we come in a year, that number we expect to drop to probably 40%, but still 40% compounded over that period of time is an excellent return. What we've done on the page 13 is just break things down granularly between the sectors that you committed to. So for example, when you committed to PAPIF 7, you did 40% in buyout, 34% in special situations, and 25% in venture. So you can see we broke it up, how that money was drawn, how it's been distributed back, what the net return is. Now we put a box in just to show how we've been tracking versus one of the benchmarks which many of our clients use, which is the S&P. And so you can see by sector, buyouts are 73% drawn, special 76, ventures almost 90% drawn for an average of 79. You can see the gross returns in that portfolio are between 12 and 15.6, and how the S&P is done. It's been tough to try to keep up with public benchmarks lately. They've been on a tear with record stock prices, but we're very pleased when our funds that are less than 5 years old can keep up, because typically there's a big gapping that happens and we underperform meaningfully. So being able to close that gap, we start to get a lot more acceleration than the public markets as we get into a more mature fund. So on the next page, you can see they have a little over 1,000 companies in PAPIF 7's portfolio, broadly diversified by industry. About 75% is in the United States, with the next bigger piece in Europe and then Asia. PASIF 2. You participated in the October close with $25 million. 85% of that capital has been drawn, and 67% has already been returned. And so there's been a lot of velocity as money goes in. These are mature assets. We tend to buy things that are 5 to 7 years old. They're 90% funded when we buy them, and so it's really in the sweet spot when you start to get liquidity. And so this fund has done a great job of outperforming the S&P. We currently are sitting at a 22.8 gross versus an S&P of 12. So we've been able to, on a portfolio level, beat it by about 1,000 basis points. It also is very diversified, and 85% of its assets are in the U.S., with the 7% in Europe. We show the breakdown for Passive 2. There are 38 different transactions. We bought 258 different partnerships. They had within them 2,915 companies. So you can see this is a broadly diversified portfolio. And you see in the percent funded column, when we analyzed these deals and closed them, 90% of their capital had already been drawn. So we knew where 90% of the investments were. We could analyze those company by company and determine what price we were willing to pay for those assets. So for PAPIF 8, PAPIF 8 is a pretty young fund. The average company's only been in there about 1.5 years. And so our goal for a young fund is how quickly can we get to a positive net return. Their startup costs, the underlying funds that we invest in go through negative returns from the J-curve. We exacerbate that J-curve because we're an extra layer on top of that. And so we're pleased with this fund that we've got a positive net return thus far of 4.5. You can see that we on the buyout sector, it's still negative. It's negative 0.4, but special and venture have driven it out to a positive number. And you can see in the box that the gross portfolio has really accomplished this, and as the fund matures, the gross net spread tightens and down to a couple hundred basis points. But right now, the portfolio is generating about a 15% gross return versus the S&P at 12.9. Sound like a broken record? Well diversified, 85% in the U.S. It's about 800 different companies in this portfolio. And then the last commitment which you made was to Passive 3. Passive 3 has been a very popular fund. We will be closing in December on this fund at $1.5 billion. We had a target of $1 billion, and we capped it at $1.5 billion. And it's received interest from around the world. I think part of it is that people are understanding better and better how secondaries work, that it really is a very interesting way to invest in private equity. It allows for a faster deployment of capital. It has a very consistent return profile, and it has a much quicker distribution profile. So it's easier to manage a large sprawling portfolio because you have more cash flow that you can then make new investment decisions accordingly. As a young fund, I mentioned that it had a very high current return. We're showing on this page that we've completed 11 different transactions, 78 different underlying funds, almost 1,000 underlying companies. And this portfolio was even more mature at purchase than the others. It was at 96%. And so very little of your capital is going into something that we didn't know was there when we bought the assets. And we like that. For those that aren't familiar with how we do it, we actually build a model, and we talk to all the general partners, and we model out every one of the underlying companies. What the general partner thinks that they can do with that company, how fast they can grow it, what they believe they will ultimately sell it for. We will adjust those cash flows based on our view of how aggressive the general partner's being, how optimistic, and then we discount that cash flow stream by 20% to come up with our price. Our goal is to generate a 20% IRR on each of the assets that we purchase. And we've been very consistently able to do that. About over 70% of the deals we purchased have generated a 20% IRR, and most of the rest of them have been over 10. So again, it's one of those things where if you are patient, if you use conservative underwriting, it's been an area where we've been able to hit consistent returns and have a lot more upside surprises than downside. So I'm happy to turn it over for questions. We really appreciate the relationship and the business, and it's always a pleasure to be here. I'm just grateful I get to stand here today because at 6 this morning they hadn't released me from the hospital, and I told them I got to go make a presentation, so give me some more drugs and let me out of here. And so I'm glad to be here today.
Yeah, thank you for coming, Brian, and we appreciate your dedication. Hopefully it won't happen again, but if it does,
I hope not. 2 years ago, my partner was in the hospital. He went into AFib. So,
You know,
bad luck in El Paso.
that investment committee is really tough on these investment managers.
They beat us up.
wow. Okay. Any other comments or questions?
Good report.
Okay, we'll have a safe flight home, and
Thank you.
Much,
Get
we wish you well on your path to recovery. Okay, David, let's go ahead and move the building report up, item number 10, because Steve needs to get out to the job site for a meeting, so
Okay,
we'll take
item 10, discussion and action regarding the report from the fund's construction consultant, Stephen Smith.
Good morning, all.
Morning.
Thank you. Okay, what I'm showing you here is a weekly report that I do. Carl gets a copy of it and Robert gets a copy of it. I started this report when when you board members approved the general contractor's quotation. So it started on August 16th. That's when it's done. And then I just kind of go through each week and I update it. One of the key dates is the October 5th. That's when the general contractor picked up the City of El Paso building permit. That, with the contract, started how many days they have to do construction. So in the contract, they had 210 days worth of, 210 days of construction time. And with that, it puts us on a May 3rd, 2018 project completion date. It started, and as you go through it, there is a few weeks that I kind of reported that there was no work done. I think we probably actually have lost about 3 weeks that they did not get a whole lot accomplished. But now we're to the point where I think it's going to all start picking up, because they've got, when I went out and checked it yesterday, they had the plumbing rough, and now they're ready to really get going on the concrete slab and everything. I'm also keeping notes on all the different items I go over with them, and I have quite a few more this morning that I've found that have been left off the plans. And I'm keeping notes on that too, mainly just to keep a lot of good backup on the project. They should be starting the concrete crew today, is my understanding, and I hope to God it picks up. Now, I have still been, I know I talked about last time, we still don't have the construction schedule. And without that construction schedule, we're waiting for the contractor. I can't show you, say, this is how many days they're behind in the 210 days, because I don't have the schedule. Hopefully, we're going to have this schedule either Friday or Monday next week.
And Steve, the schedule was delayed because we had to go back to revise was it the grading? The grading plan?
No, nothing we've done has held up the schedule.
No, well, not us, but
nothing. Nothing is.
There were some plans, or the engineer had to take a second look or tweak something, or not?
I don't listen to excuses. This schedule we should have already had. Okay. I see nothing that's held up us having a schedule. And that's all I have. If y'all have any questions.
So from a contractual sense, is the schedule obviously is required for you to be able to keep tabs on the percent completed. I guess along those lines, the worst case scenario, if they go past that May 3rd date for whatever reason, which is can they extend the building permit? And if so, what is the what's the cost impact?
At that point, you all get liquidated damages.
Okay. So they do have an incentive to catch up pretty quick.
Yeah, and I remind them every time I meet with them how many days they're behind, that I feel they're behind. Now, at the same time, if you look at the report, let me move up here real quick. They picked up some free time after picking up the grading permit. The grading permit, they picked up the grading permit on September 13th. So if you go scroll down from September 13th to October 11th, that was free time. pretty much free time. Let me see where.
What do you mean by free time?
It was time before, from September 23rd through October 5th, they were doing work out there, and that was free time for them, because that was before the 210 days started.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So the clock started on the 5th of October.
Yeah, so the clock, and they had already started some work, so they got the dirt work done really early in the project, but I don't really look at projects that way. I look at projects continuing, but then there was kind of a 3-week gap that they weren't getting anything done. But we resolved all that. They did have some excuses that things that were being held up on them getting the concrete work. But I talked to them, and the architect works for them. It's their problem. This is a design build. It's nothing caused by anybody. You know, they can only point at each other. But I think that lack time is going to start being made up. I feel pretty good that once we get this thing going.
Okay, and you have a job site meeting today, correct?
Yes, I have another one at 10:30. There's a couple items I want to talk to you about. I noticed they don't have a water meter for the landscape. I think, if I understand, if the city of El Paso still bills the water is with the sewer, and you don't want to pay sewer on using water on a landscape. I've got that, and then I wanted to go over with some of the IT to make sure that the the underground gets piped into the building. I don't want the IT guy to go out there and have to run up the side of the building or something, especially at the entrance. But I'm working on that, and they call for some pipes on the plan, but they just don't tell the size and that kind of stuff. And Robert and I are working on that, trying to get that resolved.
Okay.
I sent you an email yesterday evening with
Did
the size of this. Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you, Steve, and we'll see you again next month.
Thank you all.
Okay, item 9, discussion and action regarding current IT issues and the potential involvement of ADP in resolving those issues.
Good morning, Richard Campos, Enterprise Applications Administrator for the Department of Information Technology. I have 3 items today. The first one is periodic processing for completion. We have completed the June periodic processing. Financials has completed that. July PSB processing is being finalized, and August processing should begin this week. Periodic should be caught up within 2 weeks by November 30th, just in time to do the November periodics. The second item is data for permits database. We have a permits database with data predating PeopleSoft. We are currently creating screenshots of pages and correlating some sample data to send to PTG, to the Pension Technology Group, to determine the exact data that they require for imports into their system of that historic data. And item number 3, there was an issue identified regarding one of our employees that had incorrect information on their consolidated hours. IT reviewed that information and identified 15 other personnel that had the same problem, and we passed that on to Pat and her team to rerun the periodic for those individuals, and that should be cleared up as well. That is all that I have this morning. If there are any questions.
So Robert did it, and I'll let you go next, Robert. And I know we get the report every month, and maybe I'm just a little hazy on the details, but so is it correct to say we're not only working through the issues with ADP and PTG, but we're also still relitigating all the issues we always had with PeopleSoft?
So, yes, what Rick is saying is Every month, there's a periodic processing that needs to be done as part of the payroll processing under PeopleSoft. And we got rather behind, city did, in getting that done. We talked to Pat Degman, Patricia and I did in the last couple of weeks. She assured us that it would be moved along promptly, and it is. And that's basically what they call kind of clearing out these E-accounts, the active member accounts for the deductions, make sure everything's appropriate for all those payrolls. Our auditors needed things closed for the August periodic processing so they could pull their samples and complete their audit. And so that's one of the items that's missing with the audit that's taking place now is once they close the periodic processing for August, then our auditors are going to go back and do some sampling and checking. Without it being closed, they didn't want to go through with their sampling process, or they'd have to use a different route.
And
so
the periodic processing is how often?
Well, they should be doing that every month. Once all the payrolls have closed for the month, then it's available to be closed. We just got behind in that work, and we need to continue to prosecute that type of closing work and get caught up, because that's what PTG needs in order for the new system to work. And so we've talked with Pat Degman and her staff about why this is needed, and we certainly appreciate their help in pushing this along. So yes, your statement as to not only we're working with ADP, PTG, and all the other three-letter names we can come up with, PeopleSoft is also still around, active, and it still needs to be maintained and updated.
Okay, Robert?
I've invited some staff from the city here to talk to us about ADP, but I'd like to retire into executive session to have the discussion, to consult with our attorney.
Okay. Had we anticipated that, Robert? Executive session, or?
Mr. Suter said yesterday that he might make that motion, so you'd need a second for that motion and to retire into executive session.
I'll second it.
Okay, is that something we can address at the end of the meeting then? I'm not opposed to going into executive session to discuss. I just would probably proceed on to the rest of our agenda till we get to that point.
So I think that the executive session item, Mr. Suter, correct me if I'm wrong, is related to the item that you're discussing now. So if you want to postpone the entire item, then that's fine. And Mary's here. She'd like to hear what you have to say after executive session as well.
Okay. So can we postpone the item? Is that what you're suggesting?
Whatever the board would like to do.
Okay, yeah, so I guess, do you have a motion do we have to take a motion to postpone the item? Okay, so can we postpone the item so that we can retire into executive session? I think we can postpone it until.
Mr. Chairman, you're not postponing this item, you're just moving it.
Moving it, so we don't need a motion
in the
for that.
agenda.
We don't need a motion for that.
You do need a motion to move the item into executive session.
But we can take that up when we revisit the item, correct?
If
we take the item later.
You still have to take a board action to move it to executive session.
Understood.
Yeah, okay.
But we can bring that item back up a little bit later in the meeting.
Yes.
Okay, we'll go ahead and do that. Okay, so while Rick is here, were there other questions IT related? No?
I have a question. Do I need to return?
Pardon?
Do I need to return today?
I don't think so, no.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, thank you for your report.
All right.
Thank you, Rick.
We need a vote.
Yeah, we had a motion in a second.
Well, we're going to move the item later, so we'll address the motion to go to executive session. Yeah.
You gotta do it now.
We're going to reconsider the item a little bit later, so we're not.
But there was a motion in a second, so we at least have to
Oh.
vote no, and we can do it again later.
Oh, okay. All right, so we have a motion made by, who made the motion?
I did.
Motion made by Robert and seconded by Jesse to retire into executive session. Do we, I guess, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we can retire in executive session, but we don't have to do it right now, correct?
Okay, I think that the motion was to move the item to executive session.
Move it to executive session, not
That's
to
what I
retire.
thought was the motion on the floor. You voted on a motion to retire into executive session, which is a different motion altogether.
All right, well, let's just go into executive session, and so, do you want to go ahead and read the,
We just told them to leave.
yeah, well,
But they left.
that's what the motion was, so the motion passed.
We can reconsider it. I move that we can reconsider the motion to retire into executive session.
Okay, motion made to reconsider retiring into executive session made by Ed,
Second.
seconded by Robert. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. So now we're not retiring into executive session.
But you still need to vote on the motion to move the item to.
Okay, so do we have a motion, we already have a motion made by Ed and seconded by Robert to move the item to executive session.
No, we need a motion not to retire into.
No, that's what we just did. We're moving it into executive session.
And you
Okay.
can do that at the end of the meeting with the other item.
All right, then that's what I thought we were doing. So it's just that there was already a motion on the table, so I think we're good to go. We will address it during executive session. Okay, so what item are we on now?
Item
David?
11?
Okay,
Okay. Item 11, discussion and action regarding the receipt of a report from Ghostlight Creative regarding rebranding, presented by Felicia Garcia and Ray Sanchez.
Good morning. All right. Thank you. I know where it is. Good morning. How are you all doing this morning? Good.
So far,
Okay,
so
so the first round, last time, this is, Felicia Garcia, she's with me today, and we had talked about the name of the entity going forward. And today what we have is a couple of items, and now we get to look at some design. It's kind of in black and white format. We've got a logo and a seal, which are different, and we've got a slogan worked in there too. And then we have some recommendations on the structure of the name as well. So we'll just get into it. Okay, in terms of the logos, we have this one, and this holds the all elements of the logo, including the slogan. As an alternate, El Paso City was the name that was approved specifically, but just in our professional recommendation, and I don't know if it's something that can be addressed or modified, City of El Paso reads, and it displays much more elegantly, we feel.
Can you go back to the other one real quickly? I thought it was El Paso City Employees Retirement Fund, not El Paso City Employee Retirement Fund. I guess I thought the break was kind of after El Paso, and then it was City Employees Retirement Fund. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. As far as the name, we didn't have any direction in terms of any breaks or emphasis. We have El Paso City Employees Retirement Trust, and what we're hoping for is that you all will agree with us that this is a logo that we can present. Obviously, I'd like to go through all the seal, so we can get to the seal as well, and then you can see the suite of branding images that would be available to use in different occasions. So we can take a look there. There is a lot going on in here, and we will talk about all the symbolism and the layers of meaning. But let's go through also to the seal itself. So let me go ahead and pull that up. There are 3 options on the seal. So here's a seal that we created. What's going to be different in the 3 options would be the location of the establishment date. On this one, the date is down below. And then this one's back up above, but it's in Roman numerals. So we'd like to start with the seal and kind of start to unpack the meaning, that's all the symbolism that's involved. So what we have here basically is the Lone Star of Texas right at the center, And right behind that is a sun, which symbolizes enlightenment as well as the future. Down below the Lone Star to either side are cherry blossoms, which represent wealth and prosperity. Right below those, you see an eagle, which is strength and leadership, and then the outstretched wings is security and protection. Down at the bottom of the inner circle, you see what are three bezants, or those are gold coins, obviously representing as well as wealth. And then we have laurels on either side of the outer circle, and that is also triumph and peace. And then we have the name, and then the Employee Retirement Trust down below. There's a slogan right in the middle. The slogan is basically the Latin version of the English version, which we saw was trust in a secure future. This one is fiducia in futurum secure. We kind of really like the way that translated. So here we have 1944 in the eagle's wings, and then and then this one has El Paso City, which is the way it was. The wording was approved initially, with the date in Latin or Roman numerals. If we go back to the modern logo, just so that you have the full context, now this modern logo has 3 layers in that icon over to the left. In the background, you have a representation of the sun. Right in front of that is a compass, and right in the middle of the compass is a bezant, or the coin. You also have a circle with kind of triangles pointing inward, which is inclusiveness and multiple people coming together. And so we feel that the values of your organization is represented very well, both in the icon and in the slogan as well. And we think the arrangement lends itself to a website banner or a letterhead. And of course, the seal can be applied as is necessary for awards or recognitions and that type of thing. Of course, we went through, discussed this with the committee before we brought it over to you, and this is the refinement of those meetings.
Thank you, Ray. And Felicia, I think a couple points for context. So this was our second presentation. You'll notice it's in black and white. So the comments that we make today, our contract allows for one revision to the logo or the seal, and then the plan is for next month to bring the final products back to the board with color, and hopefully have the board be able to adopt those, and then we'll be completed with the process. So just to touch a bit on the name and what Robert Studer brought up. So there was a little bit of confusion after the last board meeting because, or I shouldn't say confusion, but there was just a different understanding of what transpired. So everyone on the board was very adamant that El Paso as the city be recognized in our name. Ghostlight interpreted that as City of El Paso. I know I mentioned that. I think Rebecca can speak to this as well. And Robert's exactly correct that if you have El Paso City, the city has to really go before employees because it's city employees. It's not El Paso City like Culver City or Horizon City. It's city employees.
That's right.
So it doesn't really make sense if you could switch to the next slide. El Paso, it doesn't really make sense this way. Mm-hmm. So city would have to go before employees, which really now unbalances the logo. So the thought was, well, so since Ghostlight had already prepared the previous slide, this one, we asked them, Robert and I asked them to bring back the El Paso City, just in the chance that you may reconsider how it all plays together with the name and the logo. So that's just for context. And then we can go around the table and get your feedback and take it from there. Okay, so Rebecca, you want to start off?
I know originally we had said that we wanted them to put El Paso City, and like you said, I think there might have been a misunderstanding. We wanted for El Paso to be included in there. And so I know that you said that when they brought this up, when I saw that yesterday, I was really pleased with it, because we are known as the city of El Paso. We're not known as El Paso City.
Right.
We're known as the city of El Paso. So I was really pleased with this. So I personally, I really like this one. I like the city of El Paso Employees Retirement Trust. So I was happy with that.
Okay, Jesse?
So I remember us talking last month about the acronym CERT. So I thought it was going to be El Paso City Employees. So we'd be EP CERT in that case. I do understand that it does throw balance off the logo. But honestly, I don't honestly want to keep it EP CERT. So we'd have El Paso Employees Retirement Trust. City Employees Retirement Trust.
Okay.
I kind of like the city of El Paso. I kind of like the way it kind of shows up too, you know, on the way it's scripted out. I got a little question about the slogan. I guess you call it a slogan, because it repeats trust again, you know. And it talks about a secure future. I don't know if Robert can you're going to guarantee a secure future. That's a little, I don't know. I just, you know, it's nice to be optimistic about that, you know, that's a secure future, like Social Security, which may not be secure, you know. But I don't know why you have to repeat trust again, so maybe we can talk about the logo, but I like everything else. I'm not so sure about the logo or why you have to repeat trust again, or why, you know, why the word secure. Maybe there's something different. I don't know.
That is interesting. I had a chance to share this to a few city employees that I work with, and had a lot of comments on various aspects of the logo and the seal and everything. The one thing that everyone did seem unanimous was they loved the slogan. But I do take its point is that, you know, is it a guarantee or is it a slogan maybe type of issue? So we can definitely look at that. Robert?
This one's definitely the better looking of the two. I mean, it looks beautiful, but I'm kind of with Jesse. We agreed, keep CERT and add El Paso in front of it. And so I understand it would unbalance this version of a logo, and this is beautiful, but it's not what we voted on.
So I think hearing the feedback, it seems like everyone, well, and we'll get to you, Rennie, too. I don't mean to cut you off. It seems like we like this. We also discussed last week, and everyone seems to like CERT as well. I love that. I don't think that using the term CERT is going to limit us from adopting this name and logo if we want to reconsider it. Of course, we did vote on the name, so no one's doubting that. But as we said when we answer the phone or how we refer to ourselves is a little bit more up to us. So I don't think it's mutually exclusive that we would have to give up CERT just because we're the City of El Paso Employees Retirement Trust. I mean, I think we could still consider ourselves as a shortened name, CERT, the City Employees Retirement Trust. So I don't think we lose that, to be honest with you. And that might be splitting the baby where we get what looks good and what does recognize our affiliation with the city, but still our shortened name as CERT. So maybe that's a middle ground we can adopt. So Renee, did you have some points to make? I know there's no tax law involved in this one, but
I'm no stinking on this. I like the way this looks. City of El Paso looks good. I'm completely with Robert on. But we've got a name that we approved.
Well, and we haven't made any formal advancement on it. So if we want to reconsider the name at this point, we would have to make that contingent on it. So there's no doubt we did approve the other name.
Yeah, I mean, even the seal is beautiful with City of El Paso Employee Retirement Trust. I mean, that's just amazing. But I thought we voted on name, and they convinced us of the greatness of CERT, and we just wanted to add El Paso on the front of it.
And again, I don't think CERT would be a hindrance. I think we could still use CERT. Anything we're using the logo on really has all the context. So if we're just referring it to in our own tech and our own terminology, I don't think we could lose CERT.
I guess that's my big question, because again, I like this. This does look really cool. I like everything. Question again: will it cause confusion out there? These are questions. I don't have an answer.
Well, when you go with the El Paso City employees, it may imply that all employees of this, that live in the city of El Paso, you know, this is their pension fund.
Like government employees.
Which is different from the city of El Paso, right?
Exactly.
City of El Paso is very clear, that's a city of El Paso employees pension fund, whereas the other way, you might say, well, I guess any employee that's employed in El Paso, you know, can be a member of this fund somehow. That could be misinterpreted.
Yeah, I'm on board with what the board decided last week, which was to include El Paso, because initially I wasn't even sold on that. My only thing is, if we do say the word El Paso, because we have El Paso County, because we have El Paso Water, because we have a lot of organizations that use El Paso, I really think our formal name, City of El Paso, like Ed said, provides that undeniable context to this is the City of El Paso employees. But I'm completely on board with keeping an acronym CERT, which can be our shortened name. Okay, so
On the slogan, what if we went with something like invested in a secure future? We are invested in a secure future.
So what these concepts are, Ed, is they took them from the surveys.
Right,
so these
right.
are the ones that ranked high. So
understand.
certainly they could go back and take a. I think is your hang up with the word trust?
It's kind of repetitious and it's just
Maybe like confidence in a secure future.
confidence, invested in a future. We are invested in a secure future,
I've
right?
invested a lot.
You know,
Okay.
Go back to.
We
so
invest in
you're-
our employees. We invest in their money. You know, right?
Because you think, I mean, it's right, he's right, look at it. You have trust on there twice.
Yeah.
Well, and I
It's a little
think,
bit- It is a little bit
and
repetitive.
not to speak for Ghostlight, but I think they were appreciating the fact that the slogan reinforced the name. But
Yeah, there's a couple of layers, and of course, we have, you know, and just in kind of the years in doing this, there's a couple of things to consider. At one layer, you want to make sure that any logo or seal conveys in the most efficient manner your identity. Who are you? You know, are we talking about geography, or are we talking about an organization?
Right.
Geography of El Paso, or the city of El Paso as an organization. We feel that this name and the way that the words are juxtaposed do justice to the organization, City of El Paso. Secondly, as a
They're not, so my comfort zone is employees retirement trust. Your studies, your review, your expertise says that does convey that this is the city employees trust. You're comfortable with that? Because that's my hang up. I want to make sure that people understand that this is the employees trust, not the police and fire. It's not the city of El Paso, it's the employees.
Correct. Yeah, we have no issue whatsoever. Our recommendation would be for this logo as it stands. For clarity, brevity as much as possible, and also for visual elegance, I would say. You know, all those layers, in our opinion, the way this logo reads is our, you know, it's our top recommendation, our professional opinion. Now, going back to the slogan, we actually kind of went toward Latin, because I thought Latin gives an air of establishment, continuity over time, and so the slogan is derived from Latin first. And when we went through multiple translations of possible slogans, we really like how this, and I'm sorry I can't zoom, well, no, I don't think I can zoom in on this. The Latin is fiducia in futurum securi. So fiducia, in terms of financial matters, read very well. That fiducia, with the rest of the phrase, is the word trust. So an option for us was to ditch the English altogether and just leave Latin, and because the slogan, we hope that people ask what it means. We hope that some people don't know what it means, and it just sounds very important, and it's somebody in an institution we should trust in. So we would accept the presentation of the logo with a Latin slogan somewhere on the letterhead, and fiducia in futurum securi. It is repetitive, but you have two languages now, and the word fiducia reminds me of fiduciary, and I think that lends itself to strengthen the organization's branding versus a matter of redundancy at that point. Now, let me speak to the English version.
But before you move on to that, Ray, so was your suggestion there that we just drop the English entirely and stick to the Latin?
We're saying that we would accept that. I just wanted to make sure that you considered all points on the English version first. You know, as you present branding and use logos and slogans, it's not necessary that both appear together, you know, side by side, juxtaposed, okay? There you would have maximum redundancy if they always appear the way we show it. Normally, your slogan's gonna appear in other areas as a tag. Some things that we liked about this slogan, and of course, we're not married to it, I'm just kind of giving you options to consider, is one, it starts with a verb, and there's an action on it. And, you know, we commented a little bit earlier in the meeting with other agenda items. I looked at the list of people that were wanting refunds, and, you know, we're hoping that people take action and stay invested for the long haul. So the fact that this slogan starts with a verb are usually stronger slogans, because you're inviting people to have a confidence in the organization. You're also inviting employees to have a confidence in their future and in the process, but and not promising, but inviting, you know, and you're inviting the public to have that trust in you all as an organization going forward. But again, there were several slogan options that could work very well. We just happen to like the way this particular slogan read in Latin.
Yeah, the Latin phrase knocks it out of the park. I mean, it just you don't even have to be a Latin expert, and some of those things just stick out at you, even if you only understand English or Spanish. I mean, and fiduciary responsibility is exactly what we have as trustees, so it does represent us well. Rebecca, were you wanting to say something earlier?
I lost my train of thought.
Okay.
Let me see if I get it back.
Okay.
Does this mean we need a new website if we're going to go away from the pension?
We are working on that.
Okay.
It's a domain name issue.
To the chair, could I make a couple of points here just for purposes of clarifying the issues before you? Last time that we met, you all took action to name our pension fund El Paso City Employees Retirement Trust. That was the legal name that you wanted to call this pension fund. It's important because that legal name is a part of our city ordinance. And so the presentation before you is a little bit misleading because it seems to confuse the name with a logo that's before you. This presentation before you, this display, is not the name of the pension fund, but actually a logo that's being presented. I doubt that you would want the entire logo as part of the city ordinance with the words "trust in a secure future."
Well,
so you need to go back, if you're gonna change the name.
Right. We'll bring that back next month.
Change the name,
Yeah.
and then you're gonna have to take action on this particular logo or another logo that's not the official name of the pension fund. It's just a logo.
Yeah, I don't think today we're going to, I think based on the comments we've had today, the next presentation, and we can have an item on the agenda next month to resolve the name if we want to reconsider that. So I think at this point, Ghostlight is just taking the comments we're giving based on what was presented to us.
Okay.
There's no direction as far as, we can't take direction because it's not on the agenda about our pension name today. Certainly the slogan is not meant to be part of the name. It's for, a tagline is not part of the name. So I think we're pretty clear on that. So I think what we will, I think it, based on the comments we've given, based on the logo and what we've discussed, we can easily have an agenda item next month that would address the name if we want to. So let us give feedback to Ghostlight so that we can get some direction as far as, let's take it from the slogan first, not the name part. Everybody seems to like the layout of the logo itself, is from what I'm getting. Is that correct? The only question is what words are up on top.
Well, I think we like the looks of this, but I think our concern is we already voted on a name.
Correct.
So are we going to change our name because we like the way a logo looks, or do we want to see a logo that matches the name that we voted on?
Well, I think what we got
have
here is that, as Ray said, are we, and all of us have really weighed in on, is are we trying to mention a geographical reference or an organizational reference? El Paso is a geographical reference, is very vague in the sense, It could be El Paso County, El Paso Water, whatever. So it's worth reconsidering the name next month. It may stay the same. I'm not trying to say whether it would change or not. But I think some of the things that came out in this discussion are whether the organization, the city of El Paso, is what we're trying to identify with ourselves. And some of these just, they come out at different times, different ways. So to Eddie's point, I'm not saying at this point in time we're relitigating the name because obviously we're going to have to address that next month.
Let me just ask quick, let's leave, or if we don't have to leave, I want to leave with, can we have, I want to leave the name alone, personally. Can we have, pardon?
To leave it alone to what?
To what we did last month.
Okay.
We've already voted, that's it. Can we have that name, and can we reasonably have this as our logo and our seal, and that's where I'm turning to you again, and not cause confusion out there? Or is it going to cause confusion? Are we looking at confusion when there's not? Or are we okay because, again, Employees Retirement Trust covers it? Is it okay to have this situation?
It's tricky because if you have a lot of clout and a lot of money to say, hey, we have changed our name, this is everything that's changing, we're different from the city of El Paso, but we're still representing the city of El Paso, geography versus, like Carl said, organization. Ghostlight would be doing a disservice to you if we didn't show you the city of El Paso because we're a communications consultancy, right? And so the issue that we ran into in designing this logo from designers who have no idea about what we discuss other than the notes that we give them, like what you voted on, we think that congruency is really important here. And I think and I know that this goes back to a name issue, it's just something to think about, and that's why we presented two options. But El Paso City Employees Retirement Trust can be a little bit vague versus the city of El Paso, which a lot of people are already used to and which we're proud of. I'm staring at the seal right there, the city of El Paso, Texas versus El Paso City, Colorado, a county in Colorado. And so congruency, I think, is important when it comes to communication. Now, if the preference is for this name, we can make it work and we will make it work, but it is our professional recommendation that you stay consistent because you're coming out with a new look, and so you don't also want to come out with too different or too confusing of a name.
And I'd also like to add, if you go with El Paso City, then our recommendation would be that the logo match the name that you adopt. So if you want El Paso City employees, then we would present a logo that matches that verbatim, which would be exactly what we have. We can talk about the arrangement of the letters or the emphasis, but if you adopted this name, El Paso City Employees Retirement Trust, then our recommendation would be that the logo match word for word.
So
the bigger picture is just making sure it matches.
What we owe you is direction, and so we'll probably have to put a little bit of a pause on it so that we can address the name next month, because and this was not intentional. I mean, there was just some difference of understanding about what was voted on last week, so it wasn't intentional to relitigate it. But I do think some important points have come out of this discussion in looking at the logos. Okay. So we may need to take a pause on that and then pick it back up after the December meeting. But we do still want to give you some comments on the slogan and seal. But Rebecca?
Okay, well, I just want to say that we hired them because they're the experts. Obviously, I mean, that's why we hired them, and so their recommendation is to go with the city of El Paso. They emphasized a couple of times how much better it looks, congruency, like you mentioned, and how we're coming out with this new name, and they're the professionals. Obviously, that's why we hired them. Now, we would have came up with our own logo and we would have came up with something ourselves. So, I mean, I think that I guess it's 3 and 3, 3 of us are for it, 3 of us are against it, but they're really recommending it. we are the city of El Paso. We're not El Paso City. We are the city of El Paso. Everyone knows that we are the city of El Paso. When someone asks me where I work, I say the city of El Paso. I don't say El Paso City. I say I'm a city of El Paso, employee. And so, with that said, I think that we really need to consider keeping the city of El Paso because, like I said, that's our recommendation. That's what they came up with. I know that it's kind of going against what we voted against last month, but I strongly believe that's how we're known as the city of El Paso. We're not known as El Paso City. We're not known as, like we mentioned before, we're not known as like Horizon City, El Paso County, like in Colorado. And, I think that we need to stick with, sticking with what people are familiar with, and that's that we are the city of El Paso employees,
I don't think we voted on being called El Paso City. I think the recommendation was City Employees Retirement Trust. That was the recommendation last time, correct?
Actually, it was City of El Paso Employees Retirement Trust, or no,
El
Paso City Employees Retirement Trust.
That's what we voted on, but your recommendation to us was City Employees Retirement Trust. Very simple, straightforward.
Correct. That was the original.
That was the original recommendation was City Employees Retirement Trust. No El Paso, it was just City Employees Retirement Trust.
And it was the board that was adamant about having El Paso.
Adding El Paso to it.
So
I think the point of clarification was, do we add El Paso to the name versus do we add it to the front of that name?
Right.
Does that become an element of the name? And I think once, if years down the road, if we stay consistent with the seal that's right behind the dais there that says the city of El Paso and this organization as a derivative of that entity is named consistently, our recommendation is you'll be glad you did, I think.
Your original recommendation was to not include El Paso or City of El Paso, though. Am I correct with that?
Correct. And if
Your
the word El
recommendation
Paso
did not have El Paso in anywhere at all.
Sure, yeah. And if the word El Paso needs to go, it should probably be consistent with the organization umbrella.
I hear what you're saying, and I think it looks really good there. And I hear Rebecca, and I don't think we ever voted to say El Paso City. We were listening to the recommendation that said City Employees Retirement Trust. We just want to add something that says these are El Paso employees. We didn't want to be called El Paso City.
Right, and this process, it's good that we're having this debate. It sometimes takes time to flesh out, and what Ghostlight kind of challenged us with as the first step so they could move on to this was to identify a name. That's good in a sense of, okay, here's your name, now we'll build something around it.
That's my frustration is we voted on a name, they were here, and they provided us two things that do not match the name that we agreed to.
Sure, and so what I wanted to add on to that is deciding a name kind of in a vacuum without seeing how it presents and the message it sends has a risk to it. So now that we have seen these side by side, to your point, Robert, if you scroll the next slide,
I just wanted to make the point that this is exactly the name that was decided. El Paso City.
Not broken like that, which is my point. Well, you recommended City of El Paso, City Employees Retirement Trust, and we said add El Paso in front of that. And that's my point on the breaks. This is El Paso City. This is not El Paso City Employees Retirement Trust, which is the name we voted on.
We didn't. Right.
So from a grammatical,
I guess you could put up El Paso City Employees and then put Retirement Trust on the bottom of it, and that'd still be the name that we voted on, but it wouldn't make any sense.
So the city in this context is a modifier to employees. So
correct.
Okay. So we can agree that if this is the name we voted on, El Paso City Employees Retirement Trust, no doubt about it. In the logo context, you'd have to move the city in front of employees, which leaves El Paso by itself, okay? And now what we're saying here is El Paso by itself, just added on as a stick-on, which is, to your words, we just added it on there. It's now floating in space. El Paso what? To Ed's point, anyone who works in El Paso, just by seeing that El Paso there, adds some ambiguity. Okay, El Paso County, El Paso, Texas, or
they'll think El Paso County when they see in City Employees Retirement Trust below it. That's your argument?
What I'm saying is, if the city modifies employees, then the El Paso, what is it?
It's saying where we are.
It's a place at that point. It's not an organization. Okay. And I think the real question what I'd like us to consider next month is, do we want our name to reflect the geography or organization? Because I don't really think it was placed that black and white question before us last time. And it could be that we don't change it. I'm not suggesting we do at this point, but I think highlighting in those terms, and we won't take any action on advancing this until we give you that clarity, because it would be a disservice based on what we've heard here not to be flexible enough to say, should we keep it what we originally did, or should we reconsider it? Because this, we get one shot at this. We can't keep, you know, once we give the go-ahead to go ahead and adopt whatever branding we're going to have, we shouldn't be doubting it itself. And if half the board is doubting at this point, we're really not there yet, you know, and it's okay that we're not there yet. No one's rushing this. Okay.
Hey, believe me, just real quick, let me throw out, so, if I can, the summation of the problem is, we gave you a name that really didn't flow smooth for either the logo or for the seal. And so you're coming back and saying, trying to pick those same words and put them in a logo and a seal, this looks better. So you're asking us to reconsider it. That's where I am.
Yeah, I just want to be real clear on our position. Our takeaway from the last meeting was the word, the name.
Let me just, again, we've said it over and over. I want to kind of cut it. So walking away, we gave you something that when you tried to make it look visually nice, it didn't work. So you're asking us to relook at it, and that's what we'll do next week, because that's not on or next month. That's not on the table right now. So I'm hearing you loud and clear. Let's just keep it that.
Our reaction was not on the aesthetics, though. The aesthetics were aside.
Right.
The takeaway was add El Paso because it's important to have the name. So when we include the element of El Paso, which wasn't in the first one, it was City Employees Retirement. So we add the element of El Paso. The most communicative way to add the word El Paso to the name would be to add it this way. It's the most logical sense because the organization is the City of El Paso.
So based on what you're recommending.
So we represented to the committee city of this particular logo, but they said actually the name as it's adopted in the minutes is City of El Paso. So let's make sure we include that, you know, that element in as an option, since that was verbatim the order of it, El Paso City. So our position is we'll add the, you know, we think City of El Paso as those three elements, City of El Paso, should be one block or unit in the name. And I think the board has an opportunity to create that congruency with the organization now. That opportunity is at hand.
Okay,
but visually we can make it work. We've actually had some that were, but it's
yeah, I mean, we're not trying to fit the name to match an image.
The aesthetics is not, the first thing is making sure that the name is right and why the name is juxtaposed the way it is. And if it's El Paso City outranks City of El Paso in terms of going forward into the future, then we'll gladly make that logo.
And I would say what this exercise did is it took what we want to call ourselves and visually is conveying it to us, and it may.
No, it's not. It hasn't. I have not seen what we voted on. Has not been represented here. That's not what we voted on. We voted on El Paso City Employees Retirement Trust.
we didn't give them a clarity on where the break was. So that
we didn't have that direction, Robert. With all due respect, we did not have that break.
Okay.
When you just read this literally left to right, it does.
Well, how did you decide this is the break? Because you had recommended to us the City Employees Retirement Trust. We said add the other two words on top of it, and yet you chose to break up your recommendation of the City Employees Retirement Trust. You're right. We didn't provide you that direction.
Right. We didn't have a direction. If we'd known that there should be a break after the word El Paso, we would have presented that logo, but we didn't have a sense that the break should happen after the word El Paso.
Why did you choose to do the break here?
Because it looks elegant.
So I think to Renee's point, we can look at that. While we have Ghostlight here on the seal, not counting the name, because that obviously is subject to review. If you can scroll over to the seal, did anyone have any feedback related to the seal itself?
Mr. Chair, can I make just a few more points about where we are in the process? Regardless of what name you all decide ultimately, that is going to have to be presented to the City Council as a recommendation. It'll be up to City Council to call us whatever they want to call us.
Correct.
All right? So it doesn't matter what you all decide. If the council doesn't go along with your recommendation, they could call us something else.
Correct.
I'm wondering if we're not putting the horse before the cart before the horse here, because we're going to go through all this exercise of picking a logo, branding ourselves, and the City Council may decide to go a different route. So maybe we should wait until we hear from City Council on a name before we go through this exercise.
That's great
Well-
to hear. I'm glad that you've told us that. So they could prefer to call us the pension instead of the trust.
They could decide to call us what we've all been called for the last 80 years.
Well,
which
Eddie,
is the
with-
city,
but
which is the
it-
city
El Paso City employees.
employees pension plan.
Eddie, with all due respect, we're 5 months into this process, and this is the first time this is really coming up at this point. So I'm not disputing what you're saying, but that would have been important to hear 5 months ago. We're pretty deep into this now, so understood at this point. It's going to go before council in an ordinance revision, and we don't have to pull the trigger on any rebranding until that ordinance does get to council, because it's part of a kind of an omnibus package at this point. What our ordinance has to go to council. So
Is this
to your
our current
point,
logo?
to your point,
It's on the website also.
we're not going to spend any more money than we already have until we get council's approval by the ordinance. So that is a point well taken.
Just for the record, our current logo says El Paso, and then it has 4 small words that say City Employees Pension Fund. So really, when we
so
took our name
Robert,
vote,
yeah,
all we
I-
did was change the last 2 words of what our current logo looks
Understood.
like.
I mean, it's that's why we're going through this process. So it's understood. Did you have more to add, Eddie?
No, that's all I had
Okay.
to say.
So, understood about what we choose for a name and what council approves. On the visual aspects of the seal, is there anything that you don't like as far as what's presented visually?
Great. I like the first one with the established 1944 at the top, and I
That-
like it in Latin.
That's the one I
think that
favored.
looks good.
It's also an option to only have a seal out of this process, to use the seal. I mean,
Well-
it's something that we've done before. We can look at the modern logo as well, but it's an option.
Yeah, so we have included in this project both items, so I wouldn't recommend that we only pick one coming out of it. But, so one last, any other comments on the seal?
Actually, on the seal, I like the year in the wings of I like to see a clear horizon, actually, pun intended.
Interesting point, yes.
This is the
The
one.
only comment I have about the one on the wings is it doesn't have the established on it. 1944 just kind of floating out there.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a given when you see a seal and a year.
I don't know. I kind of like it on
I like the
the
established.
on the arc.
Yeah.
So you like the arc?
I like the arc. just
You
as
like
a
the
look.
arc?
I do.
I like
do,
the arc. I
yeah.
think so. The consensus is on the arc. As far as the slogan goes, so we've thrown out a couple of back and forths on the slogan. What are your thoughts, Ed, on the Latin slogan? Because it's obviously a direct translation of this.
I'm not real big on the Latin part. It's like a pluribus unum. You know, probably a lot of people today would not know what that means. Particularly the millennials wouldn't know. Those of us that were, you know, that really, they wouldn't have
I'm
a
a
clue.
millennial,
You
and I
know?
know what it means.
I'm not real big on the Latin.
That was a big swipe.
But I think, to their point and Carl's point, those words are more closely matched to what we use on a daily basis than e pluribus unum are. I mean, fiducia, futurum, secura are very straightforward. If I pronounce it correctly, I don't know. But
I'm not going to curse.
Assuming you, right. I don't know. If we need it, it was fine, but I'm not real big on it.
So but maybe I guess to your point is if we change trust to investment or confidence or something like that,
Yeah.
then it messes with the Latin one, which is on the seal. To your point.
Yeah, while we were discussing, like, I did a quick, not official translation on, we like invested in a secure future. I think it's not a verb at the front, but it's, we like the way that reads, so I appreciate that, Ed. But in Latin, it would read, invested securi in posterum, something like that. Invested, just the English spelling, securi or secure, in posterum, or posterity, future. So
Sounds good to me.
You guys like that?
Yeah, I really do.
do you
invested
think?
in a secure future is a very nice English slogan.
Do you prefer invested or trust, Rebecca?
I kind of like the way it looks right now.
Fiducia is
I don't like the
fiducia
way,
is strong.
I like the Latin version of it, but I don't like how it says trust in, because it you know, you use it twice in our logo.
But if
So,
it's not next to the
if
name.
it's not next to if it's not in the logo, you know, then I like it like this. If it's on the logo, I don't like for it to say trust in, what is it? Trust in the future.
That's good. Yeah, no, I like it as it is.
You like it as it is?
Right. And I actually wouldn't be opposed to putting it Latin in the logo. So.
I don't know, I've just been thinking about the whole process, and we've been spending a lot of time talking about our name and our logo, and at times it's felt trivial to argue over word choice here and there, but this is how we're going to be known, and even just bringing up the domain name, looking at our current website that says the new pension office is taking shape, and we're referring to the new building as a pension office, and so we are going to change the retirement trust, which I think the board, if I'm not speaking for everyone, unanimously really likes, and we like that change to retirement trust and what that conveys. And there's just a whole new verbiage and branding that we all need to get behind and be thinking about. So I don't want to, for anyone that is potentially watching, this is a big deal, and I've kind of thought a couple times, what am I getting so hung up on? But we've had this last logo for 70 some odd years and our name, and I hope that this next one lasts even longer than that. So I want to make sure we put the time and effort and have the discussion into it.
Oh, yeah. So what are you, along those lines, what's your thought on the trust in a secure future, invest in a secure future? What are your thoughts?
I'm fine with any of those. That's not my primary concern. I'll go along with pretty much the rest
Either
of the
one.
board's
What do you
wishes,
think,
yeah.
Renee?
I like investment.
Okay, so
What do you think?
I could go, you know, my primary one would be trust in a secure future. I had noticed that there's the redundancy with trust, but if we're not using it next to the logo, we don't have to all the time. I like invested in a secure future. I guess what tips the weight for me is the Latin translation is more elegant, I think, on the trust in a secure future.
I like it also. Do we have to use it on our logo? I mean, do we have to put trust in a secure
No, you don't have.
future?
No, you can have the logo.
I mean, can we
without the
just
slogan.
have have it on the seal and not have it on our logo?
Well, you could, but you're still adopting it, you know, in the language. You know, how we use it is up to us. The question is, do we like what it conveys? Okay. So, I guess from what I'm hearing, maybe there's a little more leaning towards trust in a secure future.
And I'm
okay.
99 one way, 99 the other way. Doesn't matter.
All right. So I think we can stick with that. Now, so that we don't get off kilter here, I think we'll go ahead and pause having you do any more development until we get and the next board meeting, and we can either confirm or rename the board. Then you've heard our comments today. In December, you can take those and then hopefully bring it back to us, and then in color, so we can make the final decision. And as Eddie said, this is all subject to the whim of City Council. I really can't see them micromanaging our branding based on the thorough vetting we're doing at this level. And
we hope they do.
Right. But that's a point well taken.
Mr. Chairman, I always like to give a little bit more positive direction to our consultants, you know, so they don't kind of, and I know last time we said El Paso City Employees Trust, you know. But I guess the question is, what's wrong? We can always change our mind, right? What's wrong with City of El Paso, I guess? Why are you against City of El Paso?
I don't think anyone's against it.
Yeah.
So why don't we vote on it and just
we
say...
can't, because it's not on the agenda today. You know, it wasn't on the agenda to consider renaming.
We can give direction, just like you gave direction on the logo.
We could, although it may be preemptive since we had already agreed on a name. So I don't think it's going to slow us down in the process too much, because our December meeting is early, and we do have the holidays built in there. So I don't think it's going to really put us behind more than a few weeks, but I do think we're going to have to do that. And then they'll already take our feedback, so they'll already have everything ready to go. So as soon as we give them that clear direction.
So what are we going to do at the next meeting?
I'll put an agenda item to, reconsider the name of the pension fund, or the Employees Retirement Trust.
And I don't have a problem with the name. We've been known for 73 years as El Paso City Employees Pension Fund.
With an apostrophe on employees, I might add.
Yes, with an apostrophe on employees. But so I don't have a problem with it, but we've been able to go 73 years known as El Paso City Employees Pension Fund. So the thought now that people aren't going to know who we are if we don't have City First, they've
But
known for
again,
73
and-
years.
Understood. And I really, I don't want to beat an already dead horse, but I think we can either confirm what we decided next month or take the comments we've had today and change it so that we have clear direction.
And that first logo you showed, beautiful. I mean, it is elegant, as you said. What's the color scheme? Do we have that thought of it all yet? Okay.
Not gonna venture there.
But I mean, it's just, and we haven't really spent any time talking about just the logo off to the left, but I think even that is very elegant.
Yeah, it is. I'm sure you have a lot of horror stories to tell from your end about how dealing with boards and committees can be. But
our horror stories are mostly of, man, we should have done it this way, and you know, municipalities from left and right.
second guessing themselves.
Well,
after it's done, you mean?
Yeah, down the road mostly with inconsistencies. When things are not consistent with an umbrella organization, then there's a lot of why didn't we do it? And because you know, I've been doing this for 19 years, and I spent 6 years at the county of El Paso and in branding and websites and development, and so I just based on that experience, we kind of offered this board an opportunity to draw upon that.
Okay. Well, I think you've done good work, and thank you for your time and expertise. And we will, if you're welcome to attend our next board meeting. David or Karina can give you. We already have the date and time. It's going to be a little bit different. It's going to be on a Thursday. Thursday, December 14th. So if you want to be here for the for the discussion on the name, then you can know how to proceed at that point. Okay.
Appreciate your feedback. Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you. And ironically, all this stemmed from, I think one day Robert brought something to my attention, like IT wants to change the logo on our website. That happened this summer, and so all this came from that. Okay, David, you're up.
Okay, item 12, discussion and action to accept the resignation of Deputy Administrator and approve the Administrative Services Committee recommendation to fill the position.
So, Robert, you want to lead off with the letter?
Sure. Patricia surprised me on the 30th of October, walking into my office, and I could tell by just her face that she had something to tell me that maybe I wasn't going to like. Having worked with her for almost 22 years, you get to know someone pretty well, and I could just tell something was up. And she kind of handed me a letter and said, it's time, and it was her letter indicating that she was going to retire with her last day of work on January 4th of next year. And certainly it's with some regret that we accept this letter on her behalf. I was a little shook up about it, having worked with someone for so long, and she's such a good and capable employee. But certainly after 44 years working in conjunction with both the city and the fund, certainly can understand that maybe it's a well-deserved congratulations at this point. And so the item on the agenda is partially to accept that letter of retirement, basically, and certainly it's with regrets on my part, but the official notice has been given to the fund, and so I want to share that with you.
What if we vote no?
I think the 13th Amendment keeps you from enslaving her, so.
Involuntary servitude.
That's right. But she's certainly been a great employee over the last 22 years and 44 years if you look at the city and the fund, and my hats off to her and my appreciations to her for the service she's provided to the board.
So, on behalf of the board, Pat, we'd definitely like to thank you for your extreme dedication over the course of, was it 23 years with the fund? And so, you're definitely going to be missed, and you're the power behind the throne, I'm sure, with respect to Robert. So, sorry we couldn't build the building fast enough to get you that corner office with the view. maybe you can be a professor emeritus, and we can have you stop by and share your wealth of knowledge.
Most definitely.
Absolutely, you'll definitely be, and maybe we can recruit you to be the first president of our retirees association. So. In accepting the what's before the board is to accept the notification of retirement from Pat, and included in the minutes for the Admin Services Committee, we did per the policy. We'll be recognizing her with a service award at the next board meeting, I believe. So we'll have that forthcoming. So what this process opened up with her pending retirement is obviously for us to fill this vacancy, and I know at different times, Renee being the past chair, myself, Ed, we've all focused over the years on wanting to really have a viable succession plan. Robert's not going to be here forever, and we'd like to have a deputy position that's fitting that succession plan. So the committee did review this process and is going to make some recommendations right now for the board to approve. So I can walk us through those recommendations. The first one was to rename the positions of the pension administrator to executive director and have a deputy executive director. Okay, that's pending a legal review at this point, so we're not bringing that to you today. So what we'd like to do is get your direction to go ahead and recruit for a deputy executive director. Over the next 3 weeks, we can post it on the city's website and with the TXPERS, the state level. The job description is attached for your review. Robert went ahead and worked with the existing and then modified it with some suggestions I made regarding representing the fund to government officials, investment management. You can see the points on there. And it put in the degree requirement in the education and experience. So do you want to speak at all to the job description, Robert?
Robert Ash, Pension Administrator. This is a lot of change in the job description compared to where it is previously. If you approve this job description, we have basically added supervisory duties. We've added performance evaluation duties. We've talked about acting with other staff in the city in communications. We've talked about increased requirements as far as education with a master's preferred. We talked about increased supervisory experience. We've talked about having relevant work experience dealing with IT programmers, actuaries, accountants, taxes, investment consultants, and stuff that's really germane to the operation of the pension fund. And so I think it certainly enhanced the responsibilities and the skills that are required for the position. Not that Patricia didn't have it. Patricia came in with a lot of experience. She really did. And that experience was very valuable. But here I think we're focusing a little more on the technical side of the job as well. And so I think it was time to redo the job description. I think it adequately reflects the duties that we expect this person to perform. We also sought the advice of Ms. Hickman in redoing this as well. And so I think she'd agree with that.
Renee, I saw you had a question.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. Number one, who's doing this? I guess my number one question. I'm a strong proponent of board oversight, not micromanaging. So I guess my first question is, are we acting as advisors to our executive director / trustee, whatever you call yourself? At any rate, are we acting as advisors to Robert and say, Robert, this is what you ought to go out and do? Or are we taking on that position? And I hope we're not taking on that position.
I'm a little,
So that's
maybe I don't understand what your question is, Renee.
My question
When you
is,
say we, are you talking about the board or the committee?
Yeah,
or?
the board, the board through the committee.
Right.
The board through the committee, in my opinion, and everything I've seen, should not be directing Robert. We can give our input, but I think this is Robert's function, and I just want to know if that's the clarification. And Eddie, if you don't mind, you know,
but I'm still a little vague on what would your thought be that we might be directing in this case? Because he did bring this job application to the committee.
Yeah.
For our review.
Okay.
And so what's
I know. Okay, let me answer the simple question. So he brought it for our review. We're saying, yeah, we like this, but again, this is going to be. You kept saying we, and I said Robert will be performing this. Robert will be interviewing the person. Robert.
Well, I didn't finish the process yet.
Oh, okay.
So and you make good points, because at our last board meeting we kind of delegated a lot of authority to Robert to deal with his staff with regard to performance evaluations and things like that.
That's right.
We did clarify that the executive director or the pension administrator, I don't mean to mix the words up, and the deputy would be still subject to the board's oversight. So in terms of keeping in other words, the deputy and the pension administrator's performance review still come to the board for review and acceptance. Everybody else on his staff, he deals directly with hiring, firing, performance review, everything. Okay, so it's just those top two positions that answer back to the board. And the reason is because the deputy can act as the administrator in the absence. So they need to answer to us. So to kind of fill in the blanks, we'd post the notice over the next 3 weeks. It would close on the first Monday in December. Robert and his staff would review all the applications that came in and whittle it down to 10. Those 10 would go to the committee, and we'd whittle it down to 3 and make recommendations to the board. Hopefully in January, the board can review the final 3 finalists and make the call as to whether we like any of these 3 and which ones, if any, we want to offer it to. And of course, Robert's a part of that process all along the way, so his recommendations are going to carry a lot of weight. But we do feel that the full board should hire the deputy just like we would the administrator.
See, that to me is a huge change. I don't remember us voting or us talking about taking on a deputy assistant.
Well, no, that's what I think that's what we're presenting with the revised job description, because in the past, our deputy really was a different flavor of a job suite, you know. Now we really are expecting this person to pretty much be a slimmed down version of the administrator.
Okay, so that's
in the
what's
succession
before,
planning.
that's
correct.
what's okay, that's the clarification
Correct.
I want to know. So that's before us right now is, are we going to
Accept the
establish
job.
a new position?
Well, by adopting this revised job description, it's really not accepting a new position. We're just accepting the job description that beefs it up, you might say.
Eddie, let me ask you to chime in if you would. Are we establishing a new position? And again, maybe it's a technical issue, but from an auditor standpoint, it's a critical position.
No, you're not adopting a new position. You're simply either adding on or subtracting from the previous specifications for that position, which is something that was presented to you by Mr. Ash. You're not creating any new specifications. These are his recommended job description, and so he's asking you to approve it because both his position and the deputy position come within the purview of the board with respect to performance and who fills that position. But you're not creating a new position.
Okay.
Robert?
To what you just said, Eddie, these two positions come in front of the board for performance as well as who fills them. So I guess my question ultimately,
yes, I think ultimately who's with the next pension administrator, and because of the position of the deputy pension administrator, I think you have some input into that process as well because of the succession that may be involved.
And I guess what Robert's asking, there's no specific mandate that we hire the deputy, but because the board does approve the performance review of the deputy, just like we do I don't think it's a big leap to say we would be the hiring officials, right?
I know it's been a while since we've had to fill a position at this level, and I'm not sure if anybody was on the board back then, but I guess to Renee's thought of the Admin Services Committee makes recommendations, but who is responsible for the ultimate hiring authority of this position?
Mr. Asher, the pension administrator.
Okay.
Will make a recommendation to the board.
Okay.
To hire whoever he's recommending.
Okay.
Okay, that's the clarification I definitely wanted to hear.
Well, there's a contract with the board that the chair and the administrator sign, correct, Eddie? For this position?
Yes, correct.
So, Robert, I saw you had something you wanted to say.
Sure. Robert Ash, Pension Administrator. I believe our personnel rules right now authorize me to hire anyone except myself. The issue is I've asked the Administrative Services Committee for help in vetting these applicants. And in doing so, my idea is that once we approve the job description, should you choose to do it, then they'll be evaluated by you, and you should know what they're responsible for. But the evaluation will be done by me originally, and you'll approve it. It'll come to the board for approval, just as my evaluation is done by the chair and comes to the board for approval or ratification. Now, in this instance, we've kind of we need more than one person to review these applications. And in essence, you will have a contract that will come before the board to hire this individual, but it'll be based on my recommendation and consulting with the ASC in this instance. So.
And that's something we would take into executive session and discuss the three finalists. It would be disingenuous to the person that Robert would like to hire if the board didn't have the buy-in on such a high position. Because if Robert resigned the next day, that person is really going to be filling that role, and we have to have some direct confidence in that, vice versa, that person and us. But yes, Robert would be the ultimate, we wouldn't be moving forward without his recommendation and his final approval of that.
I think, if I may speak for Renee, that's where our concern came from. It seemed a little murky on what the process was and who was responsible for what things, and to his point, policy, administration, and we just wanted to see what those lines were.
Okay. Robert's going to make the final.
So the ultimate end to this is the board should have 3 applications for our review and executive session in January with Robert's and the committee's input. And then he can go ahead and make the final decision based on our our discussions on staff. Okay?
Okay, I think, just so I'm hearing you say, we'll look at the 3, we'll give him all our thoughts, but Robert is going to make the ultimate decision.
I'll make a recommendation. It'll
Right.
be up to
Robert's
the board
making the ultimate-
through the contract whether they want to approve this individual.
If the board, for whatever reason, completely does not have confidence in his selection, we would give him direction to go back to the well and try a second recruitment. But we're not going to force anyone down Robert's throat if that's what your question is. But we do need to approve Robert's recommendation.
Yes, I understand
Okay.
we have to approve Robert's
Yes.
recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question about the job description. I always get a little concerned about related field, but can you add finance? I know finance is one of the things that would be a related field, but I think if you don't have someone with at least a bachelor's degree in business, economics, accounting, or finance, what else is out there? You don't want to have political science or history or English or, you see what I'm saying? Psychology, even though they may have worked in some other areas, like being an investment advisor for a Wall Street firm or something. I think it's important to have that basic background, So I'd like to add finance as strike-related field.
I have no concern about that. I think
I don't
finance,
mind
investments, I think they're related, obviously, but we can add finance in that.
I don't mind adding finance, but I would not like to strike related field. I don't want to kind of eliminate anybody.
What's a related field besides those 4?
Well, I think that's up to Robert to decide. I mean, I don't want to tie his hands, but I don't think he's going to bring anyone to us. Well, and sometimes
I guess my
to your point is that we might have somebody with a bachelor's in public administration, but they have a master's degree in business administration,
or they might have a law degree, a master's in taxation.
Yeah.
But have an undergraduate degree in political science. And in that instance, perhaps the master's in taxation would make up for part of the business acumen.
It gives him some flexibility, but I don't think in any way we would.
That's fine, let's leave it that way.
Okay,
But
could
that-
you
that
go
is-
with the word relevant instead of related? Would that make a difference?
Well, related is what I'm sure this comes from a city job description. They use that pretty much in every one of their descriptions as related field. So, but I don't see a problem in adding finance if that's a thing.
Well, I'll make a motion that we add finance to the job description and approve the recommendations,
To fill the spot.
To fill the spot with right, in accordance with the discussion we had here this morning on the schedule.
And to accept the resignation.
And accept the resignation of Patricia Hickman.
Okay, so we have a motion made by Ed to accept our deputy's resignation and to follow through on the recommendations to fill the vacancy, seconded by Renee.
Right.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
Okay. Item 14, discussion and action regarding a report from Callan LLC. Alex Browning reporting.
Okay, I'm not sure which one you wanted to start with, but they're all. Okay, I have these three. Let me open all of them for you, and then you can. Yeah. Okay. I'm just. If you want to make it full screen, you just do there. Okay. But let me open all these.
By way of introduction, we haven't seen Alex before. Mr. Browning is standing in for Paul Erlinson, and as you know, Bill Howard left Callan Associates. And so Mr. Erlinson had told me that he was unable to attend this meeting, so Mr. Browning is standing in his stead. And he's got some experience with Callan and other places, and so he reported to the investment committee yesterday. And so at this point, it's all yours, Mr. Browning.
Thank you, Robert. So my name's Alex Browning. I work with Paul in the Denver office of Callan. I feel your pain because we just renamed ourselves from Callan Associates to Callan LLC. I'm sure I wasn't involved in those discussions. And well, that's the way that is. Anyhow, so just a clarification, I will be teaming up with Paul. We work on another client, a very large state pension system, and it's just the customary way we work with our clients. Sometimes people get ill, sometimes they can't make a meeting, and also I think you just benefit from two people's separate perspectives, and so that's how we typically set it up. So with that, I'd just like to start with one of the presentations here. Let's see. Hold on. Here's one. There's 14. Oh, okay. So we're missing item 14? Okay. Well, sorry.
That's okay.
Which report are you going to start with?
Market update.
Yeah, it's gone. I don't know what happened. You had them here. Oh, there. It's these three. Which one did you want to start with?
This one? That's the performance report. I think that's not it.
What's the flash report?
Okay. Normally, we have a market update PowerPoint. It's not available on the screen. But I can just walk you through my thoughts on what's happening in the economy, and that'll give you a little bit of context in terms of judging how your investment managers have performed. So, just the big picture. Right now, the Federal Reserve is trying to raise rates at the short end, okay? Part of that is to give us a little bit of cushions should we run into trouble or another recession, then they'll have some ammo to buffer that a little bit. On the long end of the Treasury curve, we have foreign buyers of our Treasuries and also of our corporate bond instruments, which is effectively flattening the yield curve. And so what that does, that kind of puts a little bit of pressure on financial firms because they can't lend long and borrow short, and have a large net interest spread. In terms of just, the dollar and our trading partners, the dollar year to date has fallen 10%. So that's helped boost our exports, especially in tech. As you'll recall, tech is about 50% of the earnings in terms of the S&P 500, even though it's probably only like 30% in terms of dollar weight. In the U.S., we've been very fortunate where unemployment's been about 4.1%. We haven't seen much inflation related to that, but just to give you a little bit of context, we haven't seen that rate of unemployment since the year 2000, and prior to that, the 4-year period 1966 to 1970. So historically low unemployment, and usually as that starts to normalize, we do see a tick up in inflation. And then just recently, commodity prices seem to have stabilized and are rising. We've seen a rise in the price of West Texas Intermediate. That's helped energy sector pretty tremendously. Also, just in terms of the globe, at this point in time in the world, we've never experienced more economies globally growing at the same time ever since it's been recorded, since 1980. So what does that mean? That means that there are fewer countries in recession than have ever been since 1980. That's a pretty significant difference looking back maybe 10 years.
If you had to attribute that to something, what would you attribute it to?
The way I guess I would attribute that to the fact that we went through the global financial crisis globally. I mean, it started in the U.S. with the mortgage problem, the over-indebtedness, and the ability to rectify mortgage-backed securities, but it hit everyone. You can remember that Iceland's financial system almost collapsed. You can remember the derogatory term given to Portugal, Ireland, Greece, etc. And so in response to that, global governments engaged in, one, monetary easing, so they brought down the rates really quickly. They also allowed banks to borrow from the government in very favorable terms. So this quantitative easing altogether basically provided very dry kindling to stoke the growth that we're seeing right now. The United States started about 2 to 3 years earlier, so we came out of that slowdown a little bit quicker, and now international countries are starting to get the tailwind of that dry kindling. Let's just see here. So just to, I guess, put a little bit greater context in what's happening right now. In the past year, as of Q3, or September 30th, just to run down asset class performance, emerging markets were up 23%. The Russell 2000 are small companies traded publicly in the United States, 21% roughly. Developed Europe and Far East Asia, up almost 20%. The S&P 500, or the largest 500 stocks in the U.S., up 18.6%. And the Bloomberg aggregate, which represents core fixed income or your bond portfolio, only up 0.1%, and that's a result of the yield curve moving up about 1%. And so there's interest rates sensitivity to bonds, and when interest rates rise, the present value of your cash flows go down, and so that basically explains the near 0% return for bonds over that period. Just to give you a little bit of a year-to-date, in terms of October, emerging markets was up 32%, non-U.S. equity up 21%, large cap or large stocks in the U.S. almost up 17%, small cap equity 11.9%, and at the very bottom, fixed income at 3.2%, and that was because you were basically getting the yield on your fixed income, and there wasn't much change over the last quarter in interest rates. Let me just pause and edit while I'm trying to figure out what doesn't require a picture. Just briefly in international markets, MSCI ACWI ex-US, which represents both developed and emerging markets outside the United States, for the quarter was up 6.2%. You can remember that developed Europe for a while, people were wondering if the euro was going to survive. There was talk of the franc mark, which would basically have been a currency union between France and Germany because they were the only healthy economies during that period of time. You know, a lot has changed, and quantitative easing has helped quite a bit there. In terms of just sectors of international markets, EM was up 7.9% for the quarter. It just that should be, you know, maybe a really good year in any equity market, and that's in one quarter. And Europe was not far behind at 6.5%. So doing really well. And then just down to the sector level, energy was up 13.5%. For the U.S., energy was the second highest at 6.8%. The energy mix is a little bit different there, a lot more gas over there, less oil. In the U.S., IT was the leader for an 8.4% return for the quarter. And in Europe, materials came in second at nearly 11%. The economic recovery there is certainly helped by a weakening dollar. So that's pushing up non-U.S. equity performance because as a U.S.-based investor, each dollar invested is now worth more in the foreign currency. And then I think lastly, just to touch on it, you're a real estate investor. Real estate markets, I think, everywhere in the United States have done really, really well. And most of that has been capital appreciation. But when you think about the return to real estate, it's composed of two parts: capital appreciation and the income that it generates. Capital appreciation was driving these outsized returns. So, you know, having years or multiple years where it annualized to say 13 to 15%, most of that was capital appreciation. The income component is more bond-like. And so that range is maybe, you know, 6 to 4%. Right now, we've hit a point in time this year where the income component is contributing more, maybe about 4.5 to 5%, where the capital appreciation has slowed down to about 2%. And that falls in line with the way we think about the reward for the risk. We think of real estate as giving you a return between fixed income and public equities. And so if it's at about 6.5 to 7%, then you're finding a return where it's in between our forecast for fixed income and equities. And I think with that, I don't know if this was mentioned at the last meeting, but I thought I would just briefly hit on it. Our longtime CEO, Ron Payton, is now our chairman emeritus. And he is being succeeded by Greg Allen, who's been at the firm for 30 years, and he was the president of the firm. Now he is CEO, president, and what he calls CROW, the chief research officer. So he took on 3 titles. Ron's still at the firm. He actually comes with me every once in a while to meetings. He has a lot to offer our clients. He's been in the business for a really long time, and I think that you know, he's just a great source of knowledge. And this marks the 3rd generation of employee owners. So Ed Cowan started the firm. Ron Payton was hired by Ed, and now Greg is our CEO. And roughly of our 180 employees, 90 are equity owners. Ron's the largest shareholder. I think it's 15% or less. And so, you know, why does that matter to you? It means that everybody knows that the reason we're here is because we have clients like you. So with that, I would like to move on to the performance report. Oops. Okay. I do I make it just one page so I can page down?
You won't be able to because it's a PDF file.
Okay. All right.
You have to scroll down.
Bear with me. First rodeo, I guess. So just before I start, one manager comment here, which is that one of your managers, Mellon, is currently in the middle of a merger with two other companies. It's Standish, Boston Company, both very well large, well-capitalized firms. Currently in due diligence on it. We don't have any concerns right now. I mean, we see the reasons behind it. They want to merge because a lot of their competitors are much larger, and so it allows them some scale and cost operations. And at the end, the hope is that those scale features actually benefit you as investors because they're able to produce the returns that you get at a lower cost, and that translates to a higher return for you. So with that, let me just... So this is a picture of your actual allocation versus the target. It's very close. It's just a little bit off. Most of that deviation is from the growth in international markets, as initially said earlier. EM is up 34%. So in the face of a rising equity market, it's very hard and costly to continually rebalance to be regimented to that target too closely. And we expect that, but it's not at this point a source of concern, and we think that it certainly fits within the target risk and return of the overall fund. On this page right here, just on this bottom table, we have the relative attribution, or how did you get the returns based on how close are you to your asset allocation target, what did the managers add over a passive implementation, and finally, how does that get to your relative return? Right now, for the quarter, it was 3%. If you annualize that, that's 12%, so well over the actuarial rate of return of 7.5%. The target return, or the passive return, was 3.33%, and a detractor here was active management in domestic equities, Riverbridge and Vulcan. And then in absolute return, the asset allocation effect, however, because of the growth of more successful asset classes, added some value. Of course, being a quarter, it's sort of hard to judge. I think 3 years is probably the operative. 3 to 5 years is probably the operative one to look at here. And so for a 5-year period at 8.56%, that's well over the rate that you're trying to hit. Certainly starts to shrink the funding gap, and we think that these are returns that everybody should be proud of, because certainly there are funds that were more aggressive or less diversified that really were betting in places that didn't work out, and thus didn't have as high a return as the fund.
You're on page 24 of the quarterly report.
That is correct. Thank you. And so, with that, I'll open it up to any questions. Or if there are any questions about the specific managers, I'd be happy to address those as well.
So on page 23, the takeaway, what can we take away about our manager effect for this quarter?
On 23, okay. So that would be, just let me go back.
I think it's yeah, right there, that table at the bottom. So for the total return, actual return 3%, our target was 3.33, and then our manager effect had a negative 40 basis points, 0.4%. And that's all in, pretty much all in equity except for the absolute return. I mean, I don't know, this seemed like it always kept coming up at the investment committee where, what are our managers doing for us?
Sure.
Why do we have active management? I don't know that this tells the best story, but.
Well, I think especially with equities, you know, one has to remember that there's inherent volatility there. I mean, it's the most volatile asset class probably in your portfolio. Quarter over quarter, it's hard to judge the performance of a manager. If it were my opinion, I would look at 3 and 5 year numbers and longer, because certain economic environments will not reward, for instance, a fundamental manager who's buying companies that have sustainable earnings, because the market really just wants to buy the hottest dot and performance. So you get buffeted sometimes by short-term trading environments in the market, and those sometimes penalize your high-quality managers. With that said, we're always looking at them. Currently on watch is, Robert, can you remind me just? Wizard. Vulcan as well, yes, and Templeton. So we're watching the managers, and we're kicking the tires pretty hard. Wizard came in yesterday. I think we had asked them some pretty hard questions. They went into some fairly high detail about how they're investing, and lo and behold, they're well above their benchmark right now. So it was almost a year that they were beneath their benchmark, and now they're coming out. And to the point I was making earlier, they try to buy companies that they think will withstand the long term, not short-term growers. And that just wasn't being rewarded in the market. Folks were buying very low quality, highly indebted businesses, because as markets were recovering, those more highly indebted or leveraged businesses rose much quicker. And so there are just times where that number isn't going to be positive. What you're trying to hit is that over the long term that active management is adding value, and if it's not, then it's certainly correct and prudent to question the fees that you pay for active management.
Thank you.
I think one thing I'd just like to point out on the 5-year annualized relative attribution effects compared to some of the short term is just how much we've diversified over the last 5 years. So our effective actual weight in domestic equities was 34% over the 5 years, and we're now down this quarter at 26%. And we've just really diversified and changed our asset allocation over the last few years.
That's correct. Thank you for making that point.
Yeah, that's good return on our asset allocation.
And so I can move to the October flash, if that's appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, so this is, again, the asset allocation. You can see that it's changed just a little bit, where the international equity has shrunk relative, the overweight in international equity shrunk relative to the other asset classes. But all in all, very close to the target. Now here's the balance sheet as of the end of October. What you'll notice is that you started out at about $785 million, had an investment return for the quarter of $7.9 million, distributions of about $2 million, and finally ending the quarter on a net basis about $6 million above at $791 million. So a pretty strong quarter for the fund. And then you will see that there were positive flows into absolute return, being funded by international equity and domestic equity, and a little bit of fixed income as well. And then finally, to look at the composite returns, for the last month, the return for U.S. equity was 2.15%, fiscal year to date, 4.8%, and then the last year, 25%. For international equity, fairly similar for the month, 2.25%, fiscal year to date, 3.76%, and then for the year, 25%. I had said this last year, or at the meeting yesterday. I mean, equities, when you see a 25% return, that's nearly a 2% or a 2 times standard deviation away from the forecast. Equities are volatile. They give you great returns sometimes, and sometimes you get a little bit of negative returns. So over time, you get that compound average return, and it's made up of high highs and low lows and some moderate returns. But over the long term, you're looking to largely fund the growth of this pension fund through equity. Private equity doesn't have a return for the month, so that's not showing up because they report on a quarterly basis, but you heard from portfolio advisors just earlier this morning. In terms of fixed income, last month did not add detractable value, and that's just an upward move in the yield curve for the month. Fiscal year to date, 0, but that was the 1% move up during the year, during the fiscal year period. And then the last year, really just the coupon return that you're receiving at 2.9%. Real estate, much like private equity, doesn't report on the month, but if you just go out to the last 2 and 3 years, having fairly strong returns at 5.3% and almost 7%. MLPs for the month, a very disappointing 4.85%. However, we expect this is a volatile asset class. It provides transportation for energy products throughout the United States. We don't have enough of that infrastructure. There's a strong macroeconomic story behind the outgrowth of that infrastructure to deliver energy to other parts of the United States. You think about the Marcellus Shale, which produces a lot of the natural gas in the United States. It's in the middle of the hills of Pennsylvania. There's not a whole lot of population there, so you need pipelines to bring it to New York City and down the eastern seaboard, and that's what MLPs are investing in. In terms of the manager, Salient, I know them well. The head portfolio manager, Ted Gardner, is probably one of the smartest in the business. So while the asset class has been detracting value, if you believe in the correlation benefits to the portfolio, which I do, there's no reason not to maintain the allocation.
How is Salient doing amongst their peers?
I can answer that. I would imagine, just looking at their returns yesterday, that they are probably in their top quartile, but rather than just pick a number out of the air, I think I can tell you. Okay, so Robert is saying that they are in the 40th percentile. So just right around median then. So, finally, absolute return. So these are your managers that pursue strategies that are different than your long-only managers. They're looking for new and interesting strategies to add value that don't have a reliance on fixed income or equity markets. So if you have a large downturn, they should provide some buffer on that downside because they're not completely levered to the same macroeconomic forces that you might see in an equity portfolio. And for the month, they were, there's total excess return there of 63 basis points. And so that brings us down to the total fund. For the month, just slightly below the benchmark, but if we go out to the last 3 years and 5 years, still strong absolute returns. And in 5 years, while below your strategic benchmark at 8.5%, that certainly covers the 7.5% you're trying to hit. And just one point of clarification, all of these numbers in this report are net of fees. So you're seeing reality, not a rosy picture of it.
So to the point on Salient and just MLPs in general, we kind of bought in at a low point in the business cycle, and we're still pretty well, we've been in a little over 3 years on this asset allocation. How long do we hold on to this before we, cut bait on this? It's, I mean, we do have a slight excess return over the last 3 years at 1.7, but it's certainly, I don't think, what we expected when we were considering entering the MLP
Sure.
market. So, at what point is there a new normal as far as what MLPs can deliver?
So the dynamics there are pretty interesting. Going into the fall in oil prices following, Saudi Arabia and OPEC basically cranking the pipes open to bring oil down to $26 hurt MLPs quite a bit because they do have sensitivity to the underlying commodity. However, that certainly made them a lot healthier. So they renegotiated all the contracts with all their suppliers, which actually allowed them to end up being profitable. Now, for this, month, one, good month could turn around these returns. The energy sector actually, just from a 10% bump in oil over the year-to-date period, led it to be the second highest returning sector in the U.S. So, the question I think is why did we get into it? I think the reason you probably got into it, and Robert can confirm or deny, is that MLPs spin off a lot of income. They're like REITs. They have a very high income component contractually because they're master limited partnerships. So that can help with rebalancing. It can also help to buffer a little bit of volatility. The question that will come up in the beginning of next year when we look at the asset allocation and look at different mixes is whether or not the volatility that you see there is attractive given the income component that probably brought you to them in the first place. And that's certainly a discussion item I think that should be looked at closely because there are some clients who are feeling that the amount of volatility or the risk that you're seeing is a little bit hard to take. And MLPs are not a crucial part of the portfolio. They're a small allocation, but that should be decided when we look at the forecasts.
If you look at page 145 of your quarterly report, you'll see that Salient was in the 48th percentile for the last year and 46th for the last 3 years.
I know if Pressy was here, he'd mention Harvest and Tortoise, so let me just throw those two names out there.
In his honor.
And both of those firms have just recently been acquired.
Really?
Yes. So Harvest was acquired by Blackstone, and Tortoise was bought by a private equity firm that is escaping me right now. But I think what they're doing is they're seeing the fact that these firms, which were single, strategy firms, typically just MLPs, were having a hard time covering all their, costs because there were probably some redemptions. And they saw the value in it. They were like, hey, we can make a lot of money here with the rise in, oil consumption and demand. So, the professional investors out there who are investing their own money are certainly behind the strategy.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Thank you for your report.
Thank you.
I guess probably is Paul expected back next month, Robert?
So Paul will be back here next month along with Gary and myself.
Okay.
So the three of us will be here.
Then we'll see you again next month.
Yes, and Gary will provide the private equity pacing schedule for new private equity commitments if necessary.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, item 15, discussion and action regarding employee wellness program.
I just wanted to briefly touch on this point to remind some board members who may not be city employees, and for those of us who are, nothing really to take action on, but just as a reminder, our pension staff actually are allowed to participate in the city's wellness program. And if you're not familiar with this wellness program, there's a variety of ways you can earn $600, $1,200, or $1,800 a year added to your paycheck if you do certain things. There's also an annual, kind of like a health monitoring where you can defray the cost of your monthly premiums. And then there's also a reimbursement program for paying a certain amount a month towards a gym membership or something like that. So I just thought it was worth, I don't really know what level of participation we've got, but there is some sort of cost mitigation effect for the rising healthcare costs that the city provides for its employees, and they have allowed our staff to be included in that as well. So as always, I would encourage as the chair for as many for employees to participate as much as possible, but that's the only reason I had it on the agenda, so just wanted to remind everyone. Okay.
Item 16, discussion and action regarding the receipt of the death verification analysis.
Robert Ash, Pension Administrator. This is a report we run every other month. Nothing of note in this report. We continue to run it. The name that's listed there is one that pops up every time we run the report because of a numerical error, but no action that needs to be taken today.
Okay. Item 17, discussion and action regarding the report from the Pension Administrator.
Robert Ash, Pension Administrator. On your dais, you'll have a newsletter still in process, but this is kind of an idea of what kind of articles we'll start running with. And obviously, we'll also translate this into Spanish. But if you have comments, don't like an article, you want a different kind of article in there, then let us know and we'll certainly oblige. The Audit Committee is scheduled to meet on the 4th of December at 3:30, and that'll be an exit conference. The audit's ongoing. We're actually waiting on some actuary information, which we expect to receive, I believe, this Friday, if it's on time. And so the Actuary Committee may want to meet and review that information at some point as well. We think that the audit may be available and completed in time for our December meeting, and that's what we're pushing for. There are some things that need to get done in order to make that happen, but they were in our offices the last 2 weeks doing field work, and I think they have some additional field work through sampling of contributions. But once they get the actuary information, then I think they'll be in a position, hopefully, to be prepared to give you the report in January at the latest, but hopefully in December. We will post that job for someone's position, the Deputy Executive Director's position through the city, and we're working on that. Hopefully we can get that done by Thursday of this week. And Thanksgiving is upon us almost, and so our staff will be working 8-hour days, still full coverage from 7 in the morning to 6 in the evening. The week of Thanksgiving. We'll be off on Thursday and Friday. There'll be no investment committee meeting in December. Remember, we moved our meeting date by 1 day, and so there won't be an investment committee meeting in December. And that date of our December meeting is the 14th at the same time. Website is being redesigned or redeveloped, and we've met with IT, and they've been amenable to some of our ideas. Some of the ideas are going to be kind of a different layout of the pages, and hopefully we'll be able to put some videos on that people will be able to access. So a new employee orientation, maybe our pre-retirement and some other things, rather than flipping through a leaflet that's 50 or 60 pages long, maybe a video, what they could listen to and play back at their own convenience might be better. So we're trying to incorporate those features. Lastly, we received a capital call of $247,000 from portfolio advisors that will be funding this week out of our cash account. That's something that typically happens as they need money, and so that's on the horizon as well. Other than that, I appreciate all the committees working and they're helping, and that's all I have. Unless you have any questions.
No questions? Okay.
Item 18 is for notation only. That brings us to open comment period. At this time, there's no one signed up for the open comment. So we go to item 19, executive session.
Item 19A and item 9, I believe, as well.
Okay. So item 19, the board will retire into executive session pursuant to Texas.
Well, let me get a motion first, David. Okay. Do we have a motion to retire into executive session for items 9 and 19?
Motion to retire into executive session for items 9 and 19.
Motion made by Robert, seconded by Rebecca. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Okay. The board will retire into executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code, Sections 551 through 551.076 and Section 551.078 to discuss any of the following.
Sometimes with small, because the small columns. Yeah, that's what I thought too. But I thought, we did that in some of our books, but the narrowness of the columns, it's difficult to do. I just thought I'd throw it out there. But I'll keep looking through.
Oh, okay, cool.
Thank you. I wasn't gonna vote no.
Do you want me to send it back?
I was just thinking that Mary, I guess she needs to wait and they could call her again, but if not.
Oh, so don't send her back?
No.
Okay.
Okay, so do we have a motion to come out of executive session?
So moved.
Motion made by Renee, seconded by Robert. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, do we have a motion for item number 9, which was our IT-related issues?
I'll move that we authorize our pension administrator to get into contractual discussions with, tell me off the name.
PTG.
PTG.
Okay, we have a motion made to authorize staff to discuss our contract with PTG, made by Renee, seconded
Second.
by Jesse. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, and then we have a motion related to our real property.
I'll make a motion. Mr. Chairman, I move that we authorize our pension administrator to publicly advertise the vacant property at 1039 Chelsea in accordance with the discussion in executive session.
Okay, motion made by Ed, seconded by
Aye.
Renee. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Last item, David?
Item 20, adjournment.
I move
Motion
that
to
we
adjourn, made by Pressy.
Pressy's place.
Made by Renee, seconded by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
See you next month at a different time, same place.
Good to see you.
Thursday the 14th, is that it?
Yes.
Hey, Renee. Before the audit committee, is there something
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of things going on, man.
I heard
Maybe it's a good thing, it's a little bit of a delay in a way. These things happen, it's like an S-curve, you know? It's kind of like a construction, you know? It kind of goes and then it goes. Yeah.